What a game for Jalen Hurts today. 3 rushing touchdowns. And you're right. I love to see quarterbacks that can not just run the defenders on their highlight reel. That was like an Allen Iverson crossover right there on that particular run.
And just like that, the playoffs looked a lot more likely. Welcome into the live post-game show. Marc Farzetta Devan Kaney, Derrick Gunn, John McMullen will be joining us just in a couple of moments. Welcome into the show, everybody. Great to have you on board. I am just beyond happy that the game ended the way it did as far as the Eagles getting their 40th points in this game. Guys, there was a lull there for a while after the first quarter. A bit of a lull, big lull. And then they rounded out things a little bit better there with Jalen Hurts scrambling. Gunner, I know you'll like this. That was his Randall Cunningham, Carl Banks moment right there. Breaking ankles there of the defensive lineman trying to tackle him there. Loved every second of that because that reestablished momentum at least a little bit for the Eagles as they get the big victory today, Gunner.
What a game for Jalen Hurts today. 3 rushing touchdowns. And you're right. I love to see quarterbacks that can not just run the defenders on their highlight reel. That was like an Allen Iverson crossover right there on that particular run. But that game got just a little bit too close for comfort there for a while. But the Saints being in such a deficit with all the talent they had out in this game, not having an Alvin Kamara, both in the running game and the passing game, makes a huge difference. Michael Thomas not even playing this season for them. The big body wide receivers been huge. Not having 2 starting tackles. You go back to last week against Denver. They go up against the Broncos team that was -3 starting offensive linemen. They come in this game and they go up against a Saints team -2 Pro Bowl caliber offensive tackles, and they did exactly what they were supposed to do in this game.
Mm-hmm. They certainly did. Well, that and a little bit more, Devin. They just kept on adding.
Well, they kept on adding until they didn't, and I don't want to get yelled at for not being positive again, you guys. I think we were all pleasantly surprised after the game last week. But can we talk about the second half? Can we talk about the second half? And I'm sure we're going to dissect it, as much as we can throughout this show. But what happened? The first half, we were dominating, absolutely dominating. And I still think there's something to be said about, going for 3 when we should be getting 6 and 7 points. So again, don't want to be this like cloudy, dark storm coming in to rain on everyone's parade. But I think we showed promise once again. And as we always mention, we want to see adjustments. It was a win, but I think the end takes away it being a good, clean win. I think there's still some work to be done there.
And I agree with that. The first quarter really set up the rest of this game for a little bit of disappointment because it set the bar so high. And you're right, when they were kicking all those field goals, you're going, all right, they're getting points. That's good, but you can't keep settling for field goals. And you were waiting for Jalen Hurts to maybe break a run again or maybe throw for a touchdown. He had the one to Dallas Goedert, ended up getting called back because Devontae Smith got called for the offensive pass interference. Yeah. You had to play a little bit later in that same possession, I believe it was, where if there was one throw I could look at Jalen Hurts and say he probably wishes he had that one back, was the ball to Devontae Smith where he was forced out of bounds. That ball needed to come out a little bit sooner. But really, you were just waiting for the offense to start clicking into high gear again like they had throughout the entire first quarter, a little bit of the first half entirely. Second quarter started to wane away a little bit. But you're right, in that second half, you felt like Nick Sirianni was taking his foot off the gas a little bit with this offense. They got away from things that they were doing really well. The Saints started to click it into high gear for themselves. Trevor Siemian started making some plays. And you were wondering, all right, when are you guys going to take control again? And that's when your quarterback stepped up and made a play. I know it was late. I know it might have been, it might have been too long before or too long between touchdowns. When you look at the fact they didn't score a touchdown from the first quarter all the way to the fourth quarter. And between there, you were looking at just the defensive touchdown with Darius Slay, which is great. And we'll talk about that. But in terms of watching the offense go from this unstoppable machine in the first quarter to then having to wait. And when they waited, they did get someone to step up and make that play. And that was Jalen Hurts. And I can't say it enough. That play for me was reminiscent of the Carl Banks Monday Night Football game with Randall Cunningham and Randall Cunningham not being denied and still getting the touchdown on that particular play. And that was what it was like for me to watch Jalen Hurts on that play, make sure he wasn't denied to get his team back into the end zone for the first offense, that is, into the end zone for the first time since the first quarter.
You have to give some credit to the Saints, even though the score was lopsided. I mean, this was a team that was number one in the league against the run. Very good defensive personnel. So while the Eagles did jump on them, the Saints made some necessary adjustments to slow the Eagles' engine down a little bit. Eagles picked it back up, and of course, the Saints made one final push at it as well. Sean Payton is one of the best coaches in the National Football League, period. And I was interested. It was very interested to see how Nick Sirianni would match up in coaching strategy against a Sean Payton team. And obviously the Eagles had the advantage in a lot of areas in this game, again, because of health issues with the Saints. But that's what you do. You beat up on you beat up on a wounded sister in the National Football League. Nobody has pity on anybody who comes in injured. And I thought the Eagles did a very good job. The thing I really wanted to see the most was this Eagles running attack against the number one run defense in the National Football League. And the Eagles had 152 yards rushing in the first half against this particular defense. They finished it with 244 yards. Now, granted, again, the quarterback had 10, 12 carries, leading the way in the rushing department. But your other running backs are averaging 6-7 yards a carry. The offensive line up front did an incredible job in their zone blocking. The backs did a great job of hitting the hole. There one stretch in the third quarter where Jordan Howard got the ball, I think, on 4 consecutive plays. He picked up 13, 11, 12. He had 48 yards rushing on one series, I believe it was. And then, of course, unfortunately, he got hurt. But it was mano a mano in this particular game. Their run offense against their run defense, and the Eagles thoroughly outmanned them in that regard. The Saints were relatively healthy on defense compared to their offense. But the Eagles' offensive line imposed their will on the Saints front seven. And man, it's a beautiful thing to watch. And again, it's like we've been talking about time and time again. When you can control the clock and move the sticks and keep the opposing team offense off the field, a lot of times it will bode well in your favor. And once again, the Eagles ran the ball 48 times in this game. We thought 40 was a lot.
What year is it? What year is it, Gunner? Like, I feel like this is a decade of football I haven't seen. Like, this doesn't happen anymore. It's amazing.
Right. They're averaging, before this game, they were averaging over the last 3 games, 42 rushing attempts for 209 yards. Those numbers are going to go up after today's 48 carries for 244 yards. And rightfully so. And kudos to Nick Sirianni. He's finally figured out what his strength is. Don't put the onus on the shoulders of your young quarterback. Continue to let him mature in a very comfortable environment, which is let your offensive linemen do the work up front, let the backs do the work behind you, and then, of course, sprinkle in your RPOs and your option plays and let Jalen Hurts do his thing because obviously when he gets an open field, he's a dangerous man, and the formula is working right now. So it's amazing how a few weeks ago, wasn't that long ago, everybody in the tri-state region, fire Nick Sirianni, get rid of him, he's a bum. Fire Jonathan Gannon. He doesn't know what the heck he's doing. Now, all of a sudden, I'm looking at social media. Everybody's singing the praises for a team that's now very much in the conversation about the playoff picture.
Yeah.
Because they win tiebreakers with a couple of teams that are ahead of them right now. They were 10th in a tiebreaker scenario coming in, the playoff picture coming in. Now they're creeping up a little bit more with 6 games to play. And you look at the last 6 opponents they're going to face, all very winnable games for this Eagles team. We could be talking about an Eagles team heading to the playoffs.
Yeah, we could be. We definitely could be. And just to distill a point a little further that you had made talking about the run game there, Gunner, what would you say, 152 yards in that first half running?
152 in the first half.
152 in the first half. So the Saints, on average, came into this game, as you mentioned, with the best run defense in the NFL, only allowing 72.9 rushing yards per game. Yes. So in the first half alone, the Eagles doubled that. In the entire game, they tripled that number. So that's why I know everyone's, you can't run against because they're number one run defense. Well, if you remember, when they started running the ball against the Bucs, who at that time when they were playing that Thursday night game were the number one run defense in the NFL, they actually had success running the ball in the second half of that game. That's when you started to see them change things over a little bit to, all right, maybe we should incorporate this run a little bit more. You think? So then they finally did it. And then over the last now 4 weeks, you have seen this Philadelphia Eagles team be a run-first team, and it's not even close. I mean, you went up today against the best run defense in the NFL, tripled their numbers on average. You also went up against the 26th best, 26th worst, if you really think about it, pass defense in the NFL, and Jalen Hurts had, like 150 yards, if that, today, in terms of what he did in the passing game? So it's a complete about face if you go by the numbers, which is fine because the Eagles did something today that we've all been asking. Sometimes you just got to play the best version of yourself and not worry about what the other team's going to do. Say, okay, this is what we do best. We're going to throw it in your face and see if you can stop it. Today, the Saints really couldn't stop it to the tune of tripling their rushing yards per game average. Incredible.
And you know, Mark, I do have to shout out because I know we talked about this a little bit earlier this week. I got some heat on Twitter because on our show last week, even though Jonathan Gannon finally had a pretty good game, I said he wasn't off the hook yet. I said he had to prove himself. And I do think, I will say, he did that today. So again, let's see if he keeps it up going into next week. But I want to shout out the Eagles linebacker position. I mean, obviously still not an ideal situation. It's still a position that we tend to ignore. But in terms of most improved position on the Eagles right now, I would argue that guys like TJ Edwards and Davion Taylor have been incredible, especially this game. And I think that was a big factor in, not that the Saints have an extremely potent offense, but I liked what I saw from our defense for the second game in a row. So I want to get that out there early in this show so people don't come for me again, because look, Jonathan Gannon, he's moving up in my book, still not completely sold, but I did like what I saw.
She's showing humility. That's what's happening.
I'm admitting, like, maybe I was wrong. I'm not saying I was wrong just yet, but you know, we're learning. Yeah.
I see. Here's the thing. I'm not. See, you have something that I like to call, Devin. You like to call. I like to call it class. That's what you have. Me, not so much. Where was this earlier in the season? We were yelling from the top of our lungs, be a little bit more aggressive defensively. Don't blitz every play, but mix it in. They did that today, and it worked. They did it last week, and it worked. Run game, same type of thing. When are they going to mix this in? When they're going to use that? And we waited for 4 weeks. The last 4 weeks, they've finally been doing it, and it's been working for them. So, Gunnar, I know everyone wants to say, oh, you can't listen to the fans, otherwise you end up sitting with them. Fans called this pretty good, got to say. We, in conversation post-game, we had it pretty good.
I would say that the first portion of the season for Nick Sirianni trying to figure out exactly what he had and how to utilize them to the best of their ability was an experimental process, a little trial and error. And then he finally realized, okay, now that we've stabilized the offensive line, now that I know we have a stable of running backs that can handle the load. All right, now let's start strategizing in terms of what our identity is. And over the last 4 weeks, the Eagles have defined what their identity is going to be. We are going to pound the football at you, stop us if you can. And if you can't stop us, we're going to keep running you over into the dirt until the game is over. When you run the ball 48 times against an opponent, you watch the body language of that opponent trying to stop it. You see guys with their hands standing around on their hips, on the knee pads. So they're worn down after a while, not just physically, but mentally as well. They're worn down. Their attack mode is diminished to a certain degree. When you're not having success containing the run and stonewalling them at the line of scrimmage, and all of a sudden they're picking up 6 yards, they're picking up 8 yards, they're picking up 9 yards. The longer you're on the field, the more demoralizing it is. The Eagles ran 77 plays in this game. 77 plays, most of them were by way of the run. And that takes a lot of steam out of defenses in terms of trying to defend what you're throwing at them. And then when you have a quarterback like a Jalen Hurts, who's also carrying the ball 10, 12 times, and he's scoring 3 rushing touchdowns, averaging 6, 7, 8 yards a carry, that's even more demoralizing. So everything right now is falling into place for this team. And I said it on my pregame show today on 97.5, and we had a great argument and discussion about it. I said, if the Eagles won this game, you have to very much consider them a playoff team. There's a possibility.
Oh, yeah.
And I emphasize the word possibility. They could run the table. Now, of course, they still have five division games. The Giants. But when you look at the quarterbacks they're going to face up until Dak Prescott, the last game of the season, and of course, Dallas already should have the division locked up, number one. Number two, probably will have the seeding locked up. Dallas won't need that game. Basically, they're going to cash it in and save it for the playoffs. So leading up to that game, who are you facing? Daniel Jones twice, Taylor Heineke twice, Joe Flacco or Zach Wilson. Any name among them scare you in any way, shape, or form? We're not talking about Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes. We're not talking about quarterbacks of that caliber. Mm-hmm. These are very beatable quarterbacks, very beatable teams. And the Eagles can use the same method against these quarterbacks as they used the last couple of games. Attack, attack, attack. They have finally, unleashed the hounds in the last couple of games. They did exactly on defense what I expected them to do. Why would you show Trevor Siemian any respect? What has he done in the National Football League to command any respect? And of course, you saw him. He couldn't handle the pressure in a lot of cases. Jonathan Gannon is bringing his cornerbacks up. They're playing more bump and run the last couple of games now. And when you have corners that can play bump and run, what it does basically is make the quarterback hold the ball just a little bit longer. And the more he holds the ball, the more the guys up front have a chance to get in his face, bat a pat down, get a shot on him, move him off his spot. That's exactly what we've seen the last couple of weeks from Teddy Bridgewater into this game against Trevor Siemian.
Yeah, I think you're referencing the first 3rd and 11 that the Broncos. Now Siemian, they just played the Broncos, so now I'm thinking Broncos. They just played the Saints. The 3rd and 11 that they got him on, you had Epps and you had Maddox blitzing on that particular play. I believe that was where they forced a bad throw, and then they were able to flourish after that. And once you saw that, you went, okay, Jonathan Gannon, let's see what you got for the rest of the day. And you saw a couple of different 5-man rushes. You saw another corner blitz a little bit later in the game. Right. They played a much more aggressive style of football because of what you just said, talking about a lack of respect for Trevor Siemian. And that's exactly how they had to play this game. It would have been one of those situations where it was so obvious what they had to do. If they wouldn't have done it, all the haters would have been back out when it came to Jonathan Gannon and his style of defense. Because you can't call it a scheme, but his philosophy is that to sit back and wait for them to make a mistake. He didn't do that today. He, again, tried to force the quarterback into making mistakes. And that's what a lot of us have been screaming from the top of our lungs for them to do throughout this entire season. You finally saw that again today. So, for me, I thought that was a big win for the Eagles defensive coordinator. You saw Fletcher Cox in this particular game split a couple double teams, which was great to see, forcing the fumble on that other one. Almost had a safety on Trevor Siemian when he got into the end zone there. It was overall, I thought, a really good game by your defensive line. Josh Sweat had a couple of hurries in this game. I'm very impressed with what I saw from a defensive effort for the vast majority of this game before they started to get into that chuck it up mode.
And someone came out of the witness protection program. Ryan Kerrigan made a few appearances today.
Yeah, how about that?
He was on the Eagles, so even he played his part. Can't complain.
Yeah, I think he was involved in that. The same play, it was another 3rd down play. Josh Sweat got the pressure. I think Kerrigan was coming in from the other side as well on that same play. It was the play that they threw to 3 Eagles, and one of them was Darius Slay, and he almost had a pick 6 in that quarter. I think it was the first quarter of the game as well. So that was something that definitely was great to see from this Eagles defense.
A lot of times, getting pressure on a quarterback is just as important, if in a lot of cases more important, than actually sacking the quarterback. When you can make him hurry a throw or become one-dimensional, looking at one target, zoning in on one target to the point he's telegraphing the pass, i.e. the pick by Darius Slay, which he returned for a touchdown. Great anticipation by Slay to get a jump on the ball, but you could tell at that particular time, Siemian's honed in on the outside receiver. Darius Slay read it, jumped in front of him, took it to the house. All of a sudden quarterbacks start seeing ghosts also. When you start getting in their faces, a lot of quarterbacks don't want to get hit. They're the pretty boys of the National Football League. That's why all the league rules were changed to protect the quarterbacks. The league wants the quarterbacks, the marquee players, so to speak, upright and breathing. They're the stars of the show week in and week out in the National Football League. But defensive players, the more that happens, the more it ticks them off. They want to get their shots on the quarterback. So even if you don't get them on the ground, just get your hit on them. Even if you get your hand on them, let them know that you're going to be there all afternoon. And all of a sudden, quarterbacks start thinking a little bit differently, especially those that are not seasoned type quarterbacks. Trevor Siemian, is not a seasoned type quarterback. He's been in the league a few years, but hasn't played a whole lot, when you think about it. And so that's why exactly what the Eagles had him. Blitz him right from the start. Let him know this is what you're going to get a dose of all day long, and it changes the complexion of a quarterback like a Trevor Siemian.
I want to just shout out a guy real quick. Pasquale Cornelio, I think I'm saying your name right, said he wasn't a big fan of our defense giving up 29 points, which is a fair point to make. But I will say this, and Gunnar, I want to direct this question at you because I still don't know what to make of this. Trevor Siemian is not a good quarterback. You didn't face a good offense today because obviously you didn't have Alvin Kamara with you as well. But what are you to make of an offense that consistently just puts up points late when they're not really in the game anymore? They scored 22 points in the 4th quarter against this Eagles team. 2 weeks ago, they scored 22 points against the Falcons in the 4th quarter after Trevor Siemian had a terrible fumble in that game. Last week, nothing worth bragging about, but they still scored 9 4th quarter points against the Titans. what are you to make up of an offense? Is it just chalking it up to garbage time and the defense stops caring? Is that what you saw? Or is it just take that long for the offense to find rhythm?
I'm not going to say they stopped caring. I'm basically saying they went in prevent mode. Okay. They had this team right where they wanted them. We see this all the time in the National Football League. Teams that are attacking, a lot of times, once they get a comfortable league, they call off the dogs. All they want to do is keep everything in front of them, make the opposition use up the clock out of desperation, and keep everything in front of them and try to get off the field without any more injuries in a game. And I think that's what happened with the Eagles. They basically called off the dogs. Now, you lost Darius Slay, obviously, to a potential head injury, and of course the Saints, inched their way back in the game, made it interesting for a few moments before, Hurts finally sealed the deal for him. But that happens all across the National Football League. It's just the way it is. It drives me nuts when teams go into, prevent mode, but I understand why it's necessary in a lot of cases. And that's a part of the strategy in terms of trying to make a team hopefully, use the clock, stay between the out of bounds lines, and basically help you do your job, which is to preserve a win. But okay, they gave up 22 points. So be it. Who got the W?
Right?
I don't care about the points given up. I want to know who got the W. The home team got the W. Their first home win in a year. That's all that matters.
Well, I think the one thing that concerns me to your point, Derrick, is that, against better teams, against a team that doesn't have their backup quarterback in, and a few guys injured, that concerns me. You don't want to let up the steam. I think, we've talked about adjustments and improvements up until now. And now I think the key word is going to be consistency, because I do think they let off the gas a bit. The Eagles did, but I also think it was just inconsistent on both sides of the ball, especially in the second half. And after the first quarter. And I think when you're up against the Cowboys, you're not going to win if you do that. It might work against the Broncos and the Saints, but when we go up against, I know our schedule's pretty easy against divisional opponents like the Giants, but you never know. And like that I think is the one key that I'm going to look for, at least moving forward, is just consistency, especially play calling Nick Sirianni and Jonathan Gannon.
Well, opponents also get paid to play the game. It's a pride factor involved in a lot of ways. You keep fighting no matter what. Teams, whether you get beat by 1 point or 100 points, you keep playing the game. Or if a coach feels that you're not giving 100% effort, no matter what, win, lose, or draw, you're going to be sitting your butt on the bench. And in some cases could be looking for work as well. So at that particular point, the Saints identified what they wanted to do to try to inch their way down the field to get back in this game. Eagles did have some breakdowns, but again, I think mentally they were borderline out of this game, once they had a big comfortable lead, and they woke up just in time to make some plays when they had to. The offense, I think, kind of let up as well. They got back in tune and made some necessary plays when they had to put this game away. And it's a learning lesson for all parties involved, the coaching staff and the players alike. A lot of these players have played this game at this level for a long time. They know what they should and should not do, but you have a lot of younger players as well who are learning along the way, and it only benefits them down the road in terms of how they approach games over the last 6 weeks of the last 7 games. What are they now? 5 and 6? So they have 6 games left. New math is killing me. So, so basically over the last 6 games in 7 weeks, I think this bodes well for them in terms of a valuable learning tool in terms of how you finish out a game down the stretch.
Yeah, that's why I tried doing the math for the good people of Philadelphia when I multiplied 72.9 times 3 and realized it was still less than the Eagles allowed today. So that was good. I was good. Oh no, I was on. I was doing that. Beep, bop, beep, bop, bop. I was hitting the calculator. It was pretty great. Gunner, Devin, when we come back, because we got to take a break on live post-game show. But here's something that we got to get into. There was a couple of things that, speaking of numbers, this is something I love saying. Numbers never lie, but they sure as hell can deceive. There was one particular instance of that happening in today's game. And also, there was a standout star of this game that might have been the brightest shining light on this Eagles offense in the early goings of this game that we'll talk about when we come back. Coming up a little bit later, John McMullen will be joining us from the stadium to give us all the things people were saying after the game from the press conferences and whatnot. And that's when we return here on live post-game show presented by Ocean Casino Resort. Go for the live show. Go for the win.